Seth Rollins meets Roman Reigns backstage after betrayal by Vision on WWE RAW. Seth Rollins just had the most emotionally devastating backstage encounter with Roman Reigns that WWE has ever captured on camera, and what happened when the architect, broken, humiliated, and abandoned by every member of the Vision he built from nothing, came face to face with the tribal chief in a hallway with no cameras, no audience, and no script, is so raw and so psychologically complex that even hardened wrestling veterans who watched the security footage are saying it's the most authentic and uncomfortable moment they've witnessed in decades. But what makes this encounter infinitely more significant than just two former brothers acknowledging each other after years of animosity is what Seth said to Roman, how Roman responded, and the chilling realization both men came to about what their rivalry has cost them and whether any of it was actually worth the destruction they've caused to themselves and everyone around them. But here's what's going to absolutely destroy you emotionally and make you question everything you thought you knew about their relationship. Seth Rollins didn't go to Roman looking for sympathy, asking for help, or trying to reconcile their broken brotherhood. He went to Roman to apologize, not for betraying the Shield years ago, not for fighting against the bloodline, but for something far more personal and far more devastating. Seth apologized to Roman for being right. For years, Roman had been telling Seth that loyalty is weakness, that trusting people makes you vulnerable, that building your success on depending on others will inevitably lead to betrayal and devastation. And Seth fought against that philosophy with everything he had, building the Vision specifically to prove Roman wrong, to demonstrate that unity and collective purpose could achieve more than Roman's tyrannical individualism ever could. And then the Vision betrayed Seth in the most brutal and public way imaginable, proving Roman's cynical worldview correct and destroying Seth's entire belief system in the process. The most shocking part is Roman's reaction to Seth's apology and his broken appearance. The tribal chief didn't gloat, didn't mock Seth's pain, didn't deliver an "I told you so" speech about how Seth should have acknowledged him years ago. Instead, Roman did something that nobody who knows his character would ever expect. He showed genuine empathy for what Seth was experiencing, admitted that being right about human nature being fundamentally selfish doesn't make the lesson any less painful to learn, and revealed a vulnerability in himself that completely recontextualizes years of his behavior and suggests that the tyrannical tribal chief persona might be armor protecting someone who's been hurt just as badly as Seth is hurting now. And the conversation that followed between these two former brothers, captured on security footage that somehow leaked to select WWE personnel and created shockwaves throughout the locker room, is being called the most important dialogue about betrayal, brotherhood, and the cost of leadership that's ever happened in professional wrestling. What Seth and Roman said to each other in that hallway, believing they were completely alone and unobserved, revealed truths about both men that explain everything they've done over the past decade and raises profound questions about whether either of them can ever trust anyone again or if they're both permanently damaged by the betrayals they've experienced and the betrayals they've inflicted on others. The question that's tearing apart the WWE universe is this: after everything they've been through and everything they've done to each other, can Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns actually understand each other better than anyone else in WWE? And does that shared understanding of betrayal and isolation create a bond that's stronger than their years of animosity? Let me tell you exactly what happened during this backstage encounter, what was said between these two broken brothers, and what this means for both their futures and their legacies. The encounter happened in the immediate aftermath of the Vision's public betrayal of Seth Rollins during Monday Night Raw's main event. Seth had just been abandoned by every member of the faction he'd built, brutally attacked by people he trusted, and left lying in the ring while his former teammates aligned themselves with new leadership that promised them more success than Seth ever could. The humiliation was complete, the betrayal was devastating, and Seth's entire identity as a leader and as someone who could inspire loyalty had been shattered in front of millions of viewers. After being helped backstage by medical personnel and clearing the immediate medical evaluation that confirmed he was physically capable of leaving the arena under his own power, Seth dismissed everyone around him and started walking through the backstage corridors with no apparent destination. Multiple wrestlers who saw him during this walk described Seth as looking like a ghost, physically present but emotionally somewhere else entirely, processing trauma that went far beyond just losing a match or a storyline. Seth's wandering eventually led him to a service hallway that's rarely used during shows, the kind of corridor that exists for equipment transport and emergency exits rather than for talent or production traffic. And standing in that hallway, apparently also seeking isolation and quiet, was Roman Reigns. According to the security footage that captured this encounter, both men saw each other simultaneously and both stopped walking, separated by maybe 20 feet of empty hallway. For several long seconds, neither moved or spoke. The body language captured on camera shows two people who are simultaneously drawn to and repelled by each other's presence, wanting to connect but not knowing if connection is even possible after everything that's happened between them. Seth was the first to move, taking a few steps toward Roman and then stopping again, as if testing whether Roman would tell him to leave or allow the approach. Roman didn't move, didn't speak, just watched Seth with an expression that was difficult to read but definitely wasn't hostile. When Seth finally spoke, his voice was so quiet that the security camera audio barely picked it up, and those who've listened to the footage report that Seth sounded completely defeated in a way that's heartbreaking for someone who spent his career projecting confidence and control. "You were right," Seth said simply. "About everything. About loyalty. About trust. About building something on other people. You were right, and I was wrong, and I'm sorry for arguing with you about it for years when you were just trying to save me from learning this lesson the hard way. Roman's response, after another long silence, was equally quiet. Being right doesn't feel as good as you'd think it would, especially not when it means watching someone you used to consider a brother go through the same thing you went through. That acknowledgement that Roman had experienced his own devastating betrayals that shaped his worldview seemed to break something in Seth. He moved closer to Roman, and the security footage shows Seth's shoulders shaking in a way that suggests he was either crying or very close to it. How do you live with it? Seth asked. How do you wake up every day knowing that everyone who's ever been close to you either betrayed you or you betrayed them? How do you keep going when you've proven to yourself and everyone else that connection is impossible and trusting people is just setting yourself up for inevitable pain? Roman's answer to that question is what has everyone who's heard the footage completely re-evaluating everything they thought they knew about the tribal chief. You don't live with it. You just exist. You build walls so high that nobody can get close enough to hurt you again. You convince yourself that being alone and powerful is better than being connected and vulnerable. You turn your heart into stone so that betrayal can't crack it anymore. And you tell yourself that dominance and fear are acceptable substitutes for love and loyalty. Roman's voice carried a weight of experience that made it clear he wasn't speaking theoretically. But here's what I didn't tell you, Seth, what I've never told anyone: those walls. They don't just keep pain out. They keep everything out. Connection, joy, meaning, purpose, all of it gets blocked when you decide to protect yourself by never letting anyone matter to you again. I've been the tribal chief for years, I've dominated WWE, I've accomplished everything there is to accomplish. And I'm more isolated and more lonely than I've ever been in my life because I chose power over connection and dominance over vulnerability. The raw honesty in Roman's admission seemed to surprise even him, as if saying these things out loud was something he'd never allowed himself to do before. And Seth's reaction, captured clearly on the security footage, shows genuine shock that Roman was capable of this level of self-awareness and emotional honesty. Seth moved even closer, and now the two former Shield brothers were standing just a few feet apart in that empty hallway. So what do we do? Seth asked. We can't go back to who we were before the betrayals. We can't unknow what we know about how people are. But we also can't keep existing like this, can we? Just going through the motions, accomplishing things that don't mean anything because we're too damaged to let anyone close enough to share them with? Roman's response was both hopeful and devastating. I don't know if there's a way forward that doesn't involve more pain. Maybe we're too broken. Maybe the betrayals we've experienced and inflicted have permanently damaged our ability to connect with anyone, including each other. But I know one thing, standing here talking to you right now, being honest about how much this all hurts instead of pretending to be invincible, this is the most human I've felt in years. And I don't know if that's healing or just a different kind of hurt. What happened next is the part of the encounter that has everyone debating what it means for both men's futures. Seth extended his hand to Roman, not in a handshake, but palm up in a gesture that could be interpreted multiple ways. An offering of connection, a request for help, an acknowledgement of their shared pain, or all of those things simultaneously. Roman looked at Seth's extended hand for several long seconds, and the conflict on his face was evident even through security camera footage. You could see him processing years of betrayal, years of building walls, years of refusing to be vulnerable. And then you could see him make a choice. Roman reached out and grasped Seth's hand, and the two men stood there in that empty hallway, connected by that simple gesture in a way that felt more profound than any elaborate reunion or reconciliation speech could have conveyed. They weren't hugging, weren't crying, weren't making grand declarations about brotherhood. They were just two damaged people acknowledging that they understood each other's pain in ways nobody else could, and that maybe that understanding was enough to start building something new. But the words Roman said next are what has everyone questioning what this encounter actually means. This doesn't fix us. This doesn't mean we trust each other or that we're brothers again or that anything fundamental has changed between us. But maybe it means we don't have to be enemies. Maybe it means we can exist in the same world without destroying each other. Maybe that's the best two people as broken as us can hope for. Seth's response was simple: maybe that's enough. For now. The two men released their grip and stood there for another moment, and then Roman said something that sounds like either a promise or a threat depending on how you interpret it. If you need to hurt someone because of what the vision did to you, I understand that impulse. If you need to destroy something because the pain is overwhelming and violence is the only release that makes sense, I've been there. But be careful, Seth. Because the line between justified revenge and becoming the very thing that hurt you is thinner than you think. And I don't want to watch you cross that line because once you do, you might never make it back. Seth nodded, and whether he was acknowledging Roman's warning or just accepting that it was offered, nobody can say for certain. The two men walked away from each other down different corridors, and the encounter ended with both of them returning to their separate existences, connected by shared understanding but still fundamentally alone. The leaked security footage of this encounter has created massive reactions throughout WWE and the wrestling industry. Wrestlers who watched it report being emotionally affected by the rawness and honesty of what Seth and Roman shared. Many say it changed their perception of both men and made them understand that the characters they play on television are armor protecting real people who've been genuinely hurt by genuine betrayals. The creative team is reportedly struggling with how to incorporate this encounter into ongoing storylines, because what happened was so authentic and so removed from typical wrestling storytelling that trying to turn it into entertainment content feels exploitative. Some writers argue they should ignore it and pretend it didn't happen. Others think they should acknowledge it and use it as the foundation for a new chapter in Seth and Roman's relationship. Triple H himself has reportedly watched the footage multiple times and described it as one of the most important moments in WWE history precisely because it wasn't planned, wasn't performed for cameras, and revealed something true about the psychological cost of the business and the characters these men have been playing for years. Now here's the question that's going to define how you interpret this entire encounter. Did Seth and Roman have a genuine moment of connection and mutual understanding, or was this just two manipulated performers being vulnerable in a way that serves their individual interests? Your answer reveals whether you're a cynic who thinks everything in wrestling is calculated performance, or whether you believe wrestlers are capable of genuine humanity even in an industry built on working people. Here's the even more controversial question: can two people who've betrayed and been betrayed as much as Seth and Roman actually build any kind of meaningful relationship, or are they both too damaged to ever trust anyone, including each other? Because there's a legitimate argument that what they shared in that hallway was meaningful and could be the foundation for healing. But there's also a valid case that they're both so psychologically scarred that any attempt at connection will inevitably collapse back into isolation and hurt. Tell me in the comments, do you think Seth and Roman can actually help each other heal from their respective betrayals, or will trying to connect just cause both of them more pain? And here's what I really want to know: if you were Seth Rollins after being betrayed by the Vision, would Roman's understanding and empathy mean anything to you, or would you reject connection from someone who represents everything that's hurt you in the past? Seth Rollins meeting Roman Reigns backstage after the Vision's betrayal wasn't a dramatic storyline development or a setup for future angles. It was two human beings who've been profoundly damaged by betrayal recognizing the damage in each other and acknowledging that maybe shared pain creates understanding even when nothing else can connect them. The conversation they had revealed that both men are far more self-aware and far more emotionally complex than their on-screen personas suggest. Roman understands that his dominance has come at the cost of isolation and meaningful connection. Seth understands that his idealism about loyalty was naive and that Roman's cynicism wasn't cruelty but hard-earned wisdom about human nature. Whether this encounter leads to healing, alliance, continued animosity, or something else entirely remains to be seen. But what's undeniable is that something real happened in that hallway, something that transcended storylines and character work and revealed the human cost of living lives defined by betrayal and the desperate need for connection that exists even in people who've learned the hard way that connection leads to pain. Seth and Roman might not be brothers anymore. They might never trust each other. They might continue to exist as rivals or enemies or simply as two people who share a history they can't escape. But after that encounter, they understand each other in ways that nobody else can, and that understanding might be the most valuable thing either of them possesses in a business that's built on working people and breaking trust.